as well as Alan Tudge, Minister for Cities, Urban Infrastructure and Population. We have Dr Geha, Managing Director of EG, Professor Peter McDonald, Professor of Demography from the University of Melbourne, and Brian Haratsis, Executive Chairman of Macroplan. A very interesting group to open up a dialogue. We always like in the Urban Taskforce to have a little bit of rigour, debate, tension, dialogue, not everyone agreeing, but it may or may not happen. But we'll see how this pans out. I particularly want to thank EG, who are our sponsors for today. The Urban Taskforce has been going for a whole 20 years, and EG, and in fact Michael Eason here, I think, was the original chairperson for the Urban Taskforce.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for that very nice introduction. And are there any Melburnians here, or am I here with only Sydney-siders? Oh, there's a few Melburnians. And I was going to make a joke about the Sydney Swans, but North Melbourne is at the bottom of the ladder at the moment, so it's probably not the best one to make. But thank you so much, Chris, for the invitation to be here at this wonderful lunch and in this beautiful venue. And it is great to be here alongside some of our great experts in population policy and urban development who are going to be sharing a panel with me in a minute as well. But thank you, Chris, for all the work that you do with the task force and the advocacy which you do on a very regular basis. You're a very persistent and strong media performer getting your message out there. Today I'd like to have a bit of a chat about population plans and how we can better manage Australia's future population growth. And for those who know Melbourne, I'm a Melburnian. I grew up right on the very outskirts of Melbourne in a little suburb called Pakenham. So it's almost the equivalent of Penrith in Sydney, about 55, 60 kilometres out, right at the very last stop on the train line. And I was born in Pakenham and grew up there. And when I was born there, it was known, I was born in what was called the Pakenham Bush Nursing Hospital, because I was seen as part of the bush, 2,000 or 3,000 people in that suburb, or that country town really. And the first set of traffic lights driving into the city was 30 kilometres away. Today, for those people who know Melbourne, it is now wall-to-wall suburbs all the way out to Pakenham and beyond. And Pakenham itself is 50,000 people and due to expand by another 20,000 people in the years ahead. And I mention that story because in some respects it illustrates very graphically the fundamental change which Australia has seen over the last 30, 40 and 50 years, where our cities have grown, they have flourished, they are much more cosmopolitan and multicultural, but they've also got significant challenges, and particularly the challenges around congestion which comes with that growth. And that's been the thing which we have been thinking about in relation to our population policy. How do you maintain our strong economic growth? How do you maintain the cosmopolitan nature of our great cities, but at the same time address some of the serious concerns which people have about the roads coming to a standstill, about the trains being full, and some of the other side effects that you get from rapid population growth without necessarily the infrastructure keeping up. And to that end, we've outlined a detailed population plan. And I'd like to take you through some of the elements of what we are doing in relation to that population plan, from taking pressure off the big cities and supporting the regions, turbocharging our infrastructure expenditure, and putting in place better planning frameworks.
Research showed that the impacts of migration on GDP per capita through the effect that migration has on the age structure are optimised if net overseas migration lies between about 160,000 per annum and 220,000 per annum. And following that research back around a decade or so ago, the Gillard government set the migration program in the middle of this range at 190,000. You remember back then Kevin Rudd was big Australia and Julia Gillard was, well, that's not... and then when she was Prime Minister, she increased the migration intake by setting it at that level, that 190,000 per annum. And it's been stuck at that 190,000 per annum number right up till this most recent budget when it was reduced to 160,000.
One is population, which is absolutely essential in Australia for critical mass. And I'll demonstrate that to you a little bit later in terms of airline prices to regional locations. Secondly is a requirement for Melbourne and Sydney to get to 8 to 10 million people pretty quickly. In other words, this isn't a rate of change argument. This is a competition argument about economics and the economics of globalisation and technology. And thirdly, it's a matter of understanding what the new services economy looks like. And so in doing that, it's all about business services. Thank you. So firstly, high regional flight costs are crazy. It costs me much more to get to Tamworth than it does to get to Sydney. It costs me more to travel to Perth than it does to get to KL or Hong Kong. But we all know that. But we all accept that, and we should not accept that. But the reason for that is that our regional locations don't have enough scale. Secondly, there are a lot of industries that have exited, and there'll be many more. So cars have exited already, and so, for example, we will miss out on the autonomous vehicles boom that's about to come. We'll miss out on all of the associated industries, artificial intelligence, and there'll be a number of other industries that we miss out on because we don't have enough scale. If we looked at the tech industry, we have nothing equivalent to a Silicon Valley. We're a pretty poor and miserable technology provider, and we're a huge importer of technology from around the world, and we will continue to do that because we will continue to prevent people who want to live here with very high sets of skills in any consistent manner. And finally, the mind scale, which is a difference between manufacturing and entrepreneurship. We've got Asia to the north, and I'll again show you some more of that. And we know that we have an incredibly low market penetration to the north, and the reason for that is we simply don't need to. We don't need to because we don't have the competitive pressure here.
I live in the lucky country. And you know why it's a lucky country? Because we happen to sit on top of the largest pile of minerals on Mother Earth. And we've got an agricultural industry that is not only growing, but it'll continue to export produce for decades, indeed centuries to come. And let's look at our amazing statistics. We've got 7.7 million square kilometres of land, but 25 million people. That makes us 3 people per square kilometre. Let me put it to you in perspective. If we were to stand people out in an even fashion, you'd need binoculars to see the next person standing in the corner. If I compare us to the USA, which without Alaska is roughly the same landmass as us, it's about 8 million square kilometres, it's 9.8 with Alaska, its density is 33 people per square kilometre. So it's about 10 times more dense. That's Mother USA, Sister USA. And what about the lucky country that we live in with its beautiful cities? I mean, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth have been ranked amongst the top 10 most livable cities in the world almost every year. Almost every year. Of course, I do, Minister, with respect, believe that this is the most significant city in the world, and probably better than Melbourne, although, sorry Minister, although I would say that if I couldn't live in this amazing harbour city, I would probably go to Melbourne. So if we have 4 of the world's most desirable locations, the first question that comes to mind, and a very low density country, why don't we fill our cities with people?
I think we've had an amazing session today. I think the Minister has set out the policy framework for which he has to negotiate greater support in the Australian public for immigration. It's not an easy task, and I think some of the politics associated with how you can win the argument was very much something I got out of that contribution. Brian and Peter gave us a bit of a reality check about clustering, about the labour force, about some of those demographic pressures that are really vital to maintaining the skill of migration and ensuring we have the numbers to ensure that this country can grow. And Shane, who I hear every day, and here I am hearing him again, has been provocative once more and he slashed about with Occam's razor, giving us some insights about how to think through these issues. I can't imagine a better panel than what we've heard today, so can you join me and thank the panel for being provocative and thoughtful.